Let's continue our topic of chords by talking about chord inversions. You might remember from our lesson with intervals that if I take an interval, in this case A to C on the bass clef here, and I invert the interval, I just take the bottom note and move it to the top. So in this case, A to C turns into C to A. So I've just changed which pitch is on bottom here. When we invert chords, it works the same way. So I could take this chord, A, C, E, and move the bottom note up, so I get C, E, A. And I could move the bottom note up again, so I get E, A, C. So the same idea as intervals, except now I have three notes. And so there's three different positions. You can have your starting position and your inversion with intervals. You have your starting position and then the first time you invert something and then the second time you invert something. And we actually call those first and second inversion. First inversion, second inversion. So let's look at some chords and see how those inversions work when we're analyzing them. In this case, we have three pitches, G, B, and D. This is a root position G chord. That chord could also be written this way, or that way. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. They're the same three pitches. It's just we're changing which one is on bottom. We could also write it this way. Where it's an octave lower. So it doesn't matter which octave we place it in when we're talking about the chord inversion. All that matters is which pitch is on bottom. And it doesn't necessarily matter which order the chord is in. In this case, I have G on bottom, and then I rearranged it to where there's a B and D and another G. That doesn't make a difference as to how the chord is analyzed. All that matters are what are the pitches and which one's on bottom. And to reiterate, this is called root position. Where the root of the chord is on bottom. If we have the third of the chord, the middle note, this is called first inversion. And this is called second inversion. To where we have the fifth of the chord on bottom. So root position has the root on bottom, first inversion has the third on bottom, and second inversion has the fifth on bottom. Or you can think of first inversion is the first time we've moved a note to a different octave, and second inversion is the second time we've moved a note to a different octave. It doesn't matter the order that the pitches occur in. It doesn't matter what's on top. It only matters what notes are there and which one is on bottom. The order of the notes on top might affect the melody, but it doesn't affect how we're analyzing the harmony. And the note that's on bottom does change how we're affecting the harmony, how we're analyzing the harmony. All right, so now let's look at some practices. So with our first one here, we have E, A, and C. When you're analyzing a chord that you suspect may be inverted or that you know inverted, the first thing that you want to do is to just take an inventory of the pitches that are there. Start with which of the notes are here. E, A, C. Now, how can we rearrange those notes in order for them to make a snowman shape that we've seen in previous lessons? How can we arrange them to where they go every other letter without skipping something? This does not look like that shape because we've skipped a space in here, and instead of going E to F to G, we've gone all the way E, F, G, A. So we've skipped too many. So what would they look like if we rearranged it? You're probably working your way there. It would look like A, C, E. That's the order that we could place them in. And if I were to rewrite ACE here on the staff, then we can see, oh, it does make that snowman shape. It does make that ordered shape. Okay? Well, with that in mind, what is ACE? Well, we analyze it the same way that we've analyzed in previous lessons. In the key of the bottom note, what are the top notes? And we can tell that in the key of A minor, C and E are both natural, which means that this is an A minor chord. Well, great. So then I just write an A minor, or a lowercase a, here at the bottom. And I'm done, right? But no, I'm not done. Because the problem with just writing the lowercase a on bottom is that tells me it's an A minor chord. But it doesn't tell me any other information. It doesn't tell me the order of the notes. It doesn't tell me which one's on bottom. If I just write an A minor, like what we did before, my reader should assume it's a root position A minor. If it doesn't say otherwise, it's root position. And if it's root position, you don't need to give it specific information. You just know it's root. But if it's not in root position, you have to specify. So in this case, this is going to be second inversion. Of the A minor chord. Okay, let's look at the next one. This one here has an F sharp, an A, and a D. So what are those going to make? How do we rearrange those to where they form a cohesive snowman sort of chord? Well, look around, move them around. Does F-A-D do it? No, no. Does A-D-F? No, that skips too many there. D-F-A? Hey, wait a minute. D, skip E, F, skip G, A. That's our correct order. So it would look like D, F sharp, A. Or you can think of it down the octave, D, F sharp, A. Either one of those will work. So we have D, F sharp, A. What chord is that? Does that work with D major? Does that work with D minor? Does that work with neither of those? Because you have to change something. Which one is it? D natural, F sharp, and A works with D major. So down here, I'd write a capital D. Now, if that were in root position, I could leave it as it is. But it's not. So I need to change what I write after that. Okay? So it's D. Is it in root? No. Is it in first inversion? Yes. Yes, it is. Because the middle note of the chord, D, F sharp, A, is the one that's on bottom here. So I'll write D, first inversion. A first inversion D major chord or a D major chord in first inversion. That's how I'll say that. A first inversion D major chord or a D major chord in first inversion is how I describe that. Let's do two more. So we've got G, C, and E. Rearrange those to make a snowman shape, and we get C, E, G. Again, if you're not sure about that process of how to rearrange things, just try writing it off to the side of the staff and see which way comes up with that kind of snowman shape to it, where there's no breaks in between the chord. So C, E, G, you might even know already, is a C major chord. So I'd write C, capital C. And which one is this? Is this first inversion or is this second inversion? Is it the third of the chord on bottom or is it the fifth of the chord on bottom? It's the fifth of the chord, C, E, G. G is on bottom. So it's C in second inversion. As I stated before, you could also have a chord that's all rearranged like this with spaces and gaps to where it's not an easily discernible shape like those. And that's okay. It doesn't matter that it's been rearranged like that. All you need to do is take an inventory of the notes. So in this case, there's a D, there's a B, and there's an F. So if I were to write them off to the side, would it be D, B, F? Does that work? No. Okay, so D can't be the bottom. Would it be F, B, D? No, that doesn't work. Okay, so then it has to be B, D, F. There, that's the shape I'm looking for. That's what I want the chord to look like when I rearrange it. So that means that this note right here is the root of my chord. Well, if B is the root, then I have B, D, F. Does that fit with B major, B minor, or neither? Well, B major has 5 sharps, and F is one of those sharps, and D is one of those sharps. So it doesn't fit with that. 2 of the notes are different, okay? Does it fit with B minor? Well, B minor only has 2 sharps, F and C, so F is sharped, but D is not. So it's pretty close to fitting B minor, except that the top note, F sharp to F natural, has been lowered a half step. And if I have a minor chord, but the top note's been lowered a half step, that minor chord becomes a diminished chord. So this is B diminished. Now it's not in root position, so I need to specify what it is. Is it in first inversion or second inversion? It's B, D, F. Which one's on bottom? D is on bottom, so it's B in first inversion. Now, when we talk about inversions, we almost never write first inversion and second inversion. We will say it. We will talk about this is a first inversion chord. This is a second inversion chord. There are rules that apply to these chords. There are situations that may be different because of these chords. But we rarely actually say, or we rarely actually write, I should say, rarely actually write all of this. Much of our music analysis is shorthand and abbreviation, so that we take up less page and less time doing it. And so there are symbols that represent each of these chord inversions. When we look at just a root position chord, and I'll take our A minor chord for just as an example. If we look at our A minor chord, here in bass clef down here, we have A, C, E. That's what we call root position. And if we were to look at the intervallic structure, we would have our outside interval would be a 5, and our inside would be a 3, right? So you could call this, technically you could call it a 5-3 chord. You call it A 5-3. But no one would ever actually write 5-3 because what I said earlier, if I don't write anything after it, I know that I'm talking about a root position chord. So for this, I don't need to write the 5-3. I would just write a lowercase a. Now if I take that same chord and I invert it, so I have C, E, and then A. This shape right here, my 5 and my 3 structure is not necessarily there. Now my outside interval is a 6. It's a sixth. But my third stays the same, right? This was a third before. You can see these 2 notes are the same here as they are here. So that could be a 6-3. Again, we want to abbreviate this as much as possible and not have to write anything extra. So because this third didn't change from this chord to this chord, I don't need to write it. While technically I could call that a 6-3 chord, I'm actually going to just call it a 6, right? I'm not going to call this a 5-3. I'm not going to call this a 6-3. This is just going to be A, and this one is just going to be A with a superscript 6 there. Now what if I do it again? Then I've got E, and then I've got A, and then I've got C. Well, now I have an outside interval that's a 6th again. Okay, well, that's kind of an odd little coincidence. But this is no longer a third. This is now a fourth. So this would be 6, 4. And could I just write 6? No, because this is a 6, and it's two different things I couldn't write at the same. So I have to show both. Also, if you think in terms of comparing it to the root triad, in this, it's already the root triad. Nothing has been altered, so I don't need to write anything. In this, I moved one note, so I need to specify what I changed in that. In this case, it now became a 6th. And in this, both notes have been moved, so I need to specify both of those different intervals. They became a 6th and a 4th. So to recap, first inversion just writes a 6, and second inversion just writes a 6, 4. So in the chords that we looked at previously, I would call these now A6, 4, D6, C6, 4, and B diminished 6. See how that takes up so much less room than what we had a second ago? It's more succinct. Now, you need to know what these numbers represent, which is why I explained it the first time with first inversion and second inversion. But now that you understand that, hopefully, we can see that this is an easier way to write it. So to recap, A6, first inversion, and I wrote A, but that would just be whatever the root of the chord is. So this is first inversion. And then 6, 4 is second inversion. Conceptually, you need to know they're called that, but when you're writing your analysis, that's all I want, is just the letter and then the number. What we saw over here with the diminished sign is that the diminished sign comes before the interval. And so the whole order, like let's say if this were built on B flat or this were built on C sharp, it would be the letter, the sharper flat symbol, the diminished or augmented symbol, and then the inversion number. So you have a lot of information here. That's the order that it has to occur in. Letter, sharper flat, so it tells me which letter I'm talking about, C, but it's not C, it's C sharp, and it's a diminished chord, but it's in second inversion. So it tells me that information sequentially. If you move the order around, then the chord starts to function in weird ways. That is the idea of interval inversion, but applied in chords. So that is what chord inversion looks like. Go through the process the same way that you would as if you're analyzing the triads first, and then figure out how the inversions work. In most of the music that we deal with, chords will not look like neat little snowmen. They'll be rearranged in different ways. So continue to practice that, continue to work with it. And as long as you're thinking in terms of key signatures, I think it's going to work out well for you.